That sounds great. So tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've done to bring computer science into your classroom.
So I would categorize it into two separate activities. The first being Scratch, through Scratch MIT. That this was, again, introducing a lot of concepts to what coding involves on a very fundamental level, but also on a really fun level, in the sense that this was something that kids started to see and started to see what they can do with it. It wasn't just, creating an animation of still pictures. It was actually creating something that looked like an animation, but it was something that they ended up drawing or creating, or they typed words in. It was really something they could own. And I think a lot of the students like that component. I also think that they like the fact that it wasn't too difficult to understand at first. That you could introduce this on a very basic level, get kids started. And even though they didn't understand everything that the program could do, the little that they understood helped bridge them to say, oh, I wonder what this code does. Or I wonder if I put these instructions together, what will happen? And of course you have kids that'll get frustrated and say, oh, I wanted this to happen and it's not working. And my response would always be, well, what are you trying to tell the program to do? So it's thinking, all right, if I'm telling the program to do this, oh, now I see why it didn't work, because I gave them a bad direction. So it was also a really good way to help them problem solve and even debug their own programs, because they could see, almost like in a real life program, how all this worked. So on the one side, I had students using Scratch for things like creating a study guide. That yes, you could have students review problems and write definitions and review concepts, or you could say, take what you know and create your own little lesson based on that. Because again, we know that in order to truly understand something, you have to be able to teach it. So it gave the students an opportunity to, one, get practice with coding, two, practice the material they learned in science, and three, share it with their friends and family. And it's just something that they could, say to a younger brother, younger sibling, hey, why don't you play through this interactive program that I created? And they ended up really enjoying that. The second thing that I worked with is incorporating Maker's Empire and Sprk Balls together for creating a maze. So 2 years ago, I did this for the first time, and despite hitting a lot of hiccups in the whole process, it ended up being a really great learning experience for the students, and I ended up figuring out what I had to do differently for the second year, which ran a lot more smoothly. So effectively what I did is I told students that they had to create a maze, that if there was a ball that had to go through this maze, it had to have at least 10 different turns. And through that, I kept it simple, 90-degree turns, so that way it wouldn't get too hectic. But it involved understanding degrees of movement, 0, 90, 270, 360, going all the way around. But it also required them to create a set of instructions. Move forward 5 blocks, turn right 90 degrees, move forward 20 blocks, maybe turn some other direction, or if they had to go backwards, go 180 degrees. So it incorporated the math component of degrees in there. It forced them to create a set of directions that could be followed, and then they took that, created a larger maze to scale. So again, scaling things up was another mathematical component. And then the coding came into play when, again, going back to those instructions. So they put those instructions into the Sphero program for their Sprk Balls and actually see it play out. In addition, I incorporated Maker's Empire as a way in the early stages of creating that maze that they could create a 3D model of it. So yes, even though they were drawing on paper, they were able to create some vision of what that maze would look like in a 3D world. And what was really great is our technology teacher at the end of it for a few students even ended up printing out those mazes. And yes, those mazes ended up, being only about maybe a big, where a small little ball could roll through like those old school little toys. But it was still something that, again, they came up with this image in their mind, they drew it, they created it to scale, they drew it on computer software, they did their coding, they tried it out, they problem solved. If the measurements were off, they figured out why was it off, was the math wrong, was there some error? The science came in to find out that we do have some errors with certain things that we do in science. So it was a large project, and it was spaced over a few weeks. So to kind of space it out, it wasn't every day for a week or two straight. It was a few days a week, so that way if anybody fell behind, then they would be able to spend some time after school or during lunch to catch up. And it's funny because I ended up, interestingly enough, for a field like computer science, most of the students who came up for additional time to work on their projects were actually girls, which suggests that, you know, if you give young girls the opportunity to get interested in computer science and give them the chance to really dig into that, they run with it. And perhaps maybe that's more of what we need in computer science, is making sure that girls have these opportunities to be interested, and as opposed to having the experience that I did when I was growing up, not feel as scared to tackle these types of problems.